Welcome everyone today. Today we're going to be walking through another series, another video rather in our series of guidance for frontline leadership on how to identify root cause, how to dig into the tactical things that you really need to be good at to be an excellent frontline leader. And I don't think there's anyone in revenue leadership that hasn't had to deal with a deal review. And so what we're going to walk through today is really a standardized way to review deals with your reps that avoids a lot of the story time that they often devolve into, and from an outcome perspective leads to more success, more wins, more sales, and a lot less wasted time. So what we put together for today is kind of a framework that you can follow to give you an example of this. In no way is this meant to be explicitly prescriptive, but is meant to be educational and hopefully a catalyst for you to look at the way that you do deal reviews that hopefully can yield to better results.
Yeah, and I think that the way that I would rationalize this in your head is, as you're prepping for a one-on-one, you're prepping for a team meeting or forecasting meeting with leadership, there's kind of buckets that we're going to put all of this thought process into for you so that as you're relating that, you can kind of bucket the thought process and how to go through it. And I think the one thing that you should always be auditing as you're going through any deal reviews is what are you doing as a leader to make sure that whatever is being said is real? To Ryan's point, is you have to get to root cause in this. It doesn't need to take you all week to do it either. We're going to kind of go through some tips and tricks on how you can do that effectively and start to build a little bit of your own model to self kind of diagnose where everything is at. So Ryan, you want to break down the kind of components?
Yeah, so as Seth mentioned, I think the way that we think about it from working with hundreds of leaders over the last number of years is there's a sequential process that we think that frontline leaders generally go through. The first part of the process is the simple one is this deal even real? So I want to assess, I've got, maybe a dozen reps, 10 reps, each rep might have a dozen opportunities. I can't possibly look at 100 opportunities, and there's likely probably not all of them are real. So I need to quickly assess, is this a real piece of business or is this some stale pipe that someone hasn't dealt with? So that's kind of that first bucket. The second bucket is once I've established like who's real in that group, then establishing where are they in the buying process? Is this a new deal? It's brand new. I'm in discovery and they're just kicking tires on my company and my product. Or is this a late stage deal where this is close to a decision or possibly a purchase? So really figuring out kind of where they're at. That's kind of that next layer deep, I suppose. And then the third one is really getting into kind of your forecasting exercises. Can we win it? And if you were to stack rank it, is this a high probability win, low probability win? So the purpose today is really the first two buckets that we want to go through. So how do I take an opportunity and assess whether it's real? And then secondarily assess where it is, or we're going to talk about how you dig into where the deal is in their process.
Yeah, and
So
I think the key distinction between the two of those real quick is the deal real is not meant to be a coaching exercise where you find skill things or you find a snippet to use in a one-on-one for your reps. This is purely for you as a leader to assess reality. The where the deal at is where you would dig into some more skill development areas of, hey, I'm focusing with Ryan on X skill. Let me dig into some of his pipeline to try to figure out where a deal's at so then I can coach him on that deal scenario. And the big distinction that's in here, Ryan alluded to, is it's where the customer is at, not where you are at in your process. There's a very big distinction and I think misnomer in SaaS today, which is, oh, I've done these things. They must be at this stage. And what we see is often crazy stale pipeline and all these other components that Ryan will kind of walk through. But those would be the two kind of other call outs in the two first buckets.
sure. So what we're going to walk through is we actually mocked up an example deal so that we could kind of put some realism to this. So we put together this hypothetical deal for Acme. So the opportunity summary is as follows. It's a $60,000 piece of business, or at least the rep believes it is. The last activity was December 13th. So it's been a few weeks. The current stage is they're at stage 3, and which in this company's vernacular is the demo stage. And they achieved that stage October 15th. The close date that's set in the CRM is the end of January. So it's in the next 2 weeks. So pretty coming up close here. The title of person we're interacting with is the director of marketing, and the contact's name is Bill. The owner of this, my rep, is Ricky Bobby, and this opportunity was created in September. So, like most deal reviews, generally some sort of kind of tabular structure in your CRM, you're kind of scanning through. We would presume you probably have deals that look something like this: an amount, a stage, a couple of dates, who owns it, who we're talking to, etc. So we wanted to at least give you that as a backdrop for our discussion, and then say, okay, if this is what we know, what do we want to go look at to figure out whether this thing is real? So that's where we're going to go next. Seth, do you want
Yeah.
to kind of walk through that kind of deal data specifics?
Yeah, I think the deal data piece is really where I think this comes all to life. Kind of broke it up into four different buckets of engagement. So when's the last time we spoke to this person? Have they emailed us? Is it one word responses, et cetera? The duration of the deal. So everybody has, win durations, everybody's state, time, and stage components like that. So looking at, how long have we been actually working this deal and does it feel actually appropriate? The recency as well would be, as we're talking about it, kind of when's the last time that we followed up with a person? When's the last meeting that we've had? Like, how is this progressing step by step? And that kind of goes into the last piece of the momentum of this is, one of the big things you can look at in your CRM to get a sense of reality is how many times are we pushing this deal out? And the caveat to that would be, maybe a rep needs help on timelines and things like that of knowing, how long our deal cycle is and when to put, the right stages in there. But a lot of times if it's somebody who's already ramped and you're looking at it consistently being pushed, that's generally a very, very large red flag to going, well, either we're misaligned to their buying process or we actually don't have a deal. We're still trying to convince them to do anything.
Yeah. So the key focus here, again, we're in that first of the three buckets. Is this deal real? You're not really hunting through the specifics to coach your rep at this point. This, what I would encourage you to think about is like, this is a litmus test. This is a quick assessment from your perspective and your experience to go, do we have a fighting chance? Is this even a real piece of business? Or
Yeah.
is this just a placeholder that we need to clean up? So let's kind of go through the four one by one, and we'll kind of dive into the details. So we'll kind of tag team this. So I'll take the engagement one. So the current engagement is we're talking to one person at this company. Ideally, for most organizations, you want three people engaged. There's no magic number there. It's just breadth of engagement is generally a strong correlation to probability of success. If you're only talking to one person, I don't know a single company that makes single person decisions. So you're not talking to the people that are a part of this process in the breadth that you'd want to. So that's a risk factor. So kind of my spider sense is up as a manager that, boy, that's not a good place to be. Secondarily, I'm talking to marketing, which if I sell a marketing product is not a big deal, but I'm only talking to marketing, which is a risk because marketing often has to get IT approval. Every time has to get executive approval, especially in the current market. Not having executives or other stakeholders involved when budgets are so reviewed and scrutinized today is definitely a risk. And the fact that I'm dealing with only a director in marketing means I'm kind of lower level. So the summary from a quick kind of spot check as a manager for me would be I'm single threaded, not a good start. And secondarily, no executives involved. So my risk hat's already on as I look at this deal. So Seth, why don't you tackle the duration one?
Yeah, and on the engagement piece as well, just going back to that for a second, this is stage 3 demo component. As you get later and later in your sales process, this should become more and more important, right? I think that's probably self-explanatory. But as you're looking at and spot checking deals, you're seeing something at a stage 4 and you have a 6-stage sales process and you have one contact, that should be more of a priority versus a stage 2 deal where, it may be projected this quarter because they want to do something, but it's probably not a huge deal if you're still talking to that director of marketing who, probably has a big say into the decision. So that's where you need to assess kind of where the deal is at. The duration of the deal kind of signifies that this is actually a bigger issue, which is the duration of the deal should only take 54 days when we're winning, and currently we'll double that. So what we then need to dig into if we're looking at engagement is start to look at the activity history really quickly and to see why is there a gap so broadly here, and start to take in that engagement of that person and go, what's the reality to this? Meaning, do we have one meeting and then there's a 2-month gap. So what the reality is like we just didn't follow proper Salesforce hygiene or HubSpot hygiene. And the duration of the deal is actually really more like 30 days since we had that first meeting or that second meeting that was a more real meeting. So we need to look at duration of deal. You need to get your spider senses up if it's 184 days. And the days and stage is probably the bigger thing here that would make me think this deal isn't real. And so as you're looking at it, look at the total days open, and then days and stage should give you the reality. If you're normally 15 days of stage and you're doing math here 4 times that, this deal isn't real, or potentially you just don't have an opportunity yet, or the account might not be ready. It might be somebody good to engage. And as you look at that, and especially you're assessing pipeline reality, you as a leader need to be the voice of reason to go, hey, we're still demoing this person, and it's been, almost half or a quarter of a year. We got some serious problems. But talk about the recency of that, because I think the recency can give you, I think, a quicker spot check into reality outside of duration.
Yeah. So just quick summary. So we're single threaded. We've stalled for now, I think 62 days since that last engagement. So then recency is your opportunity to see like what's happened last.
Right.
You could have stalled and all of a sudden the last engagement's really good. That happens. Not always, but it does. So deal recency in this case, the last engagement we had was 37 days ago. So last year. So, that's a risk factor. And the engagement was a follow-up email, not really a substantive interaction. So my rep sent a follow-up email. It's an outreach. I would hesitate maybe to call it engagement. So we've followed up 37 days ago. Nothing's really happened. So again, this is continuing to tell, unfortunately, not a great story. And then secondarily is, when was the last meeting? So engagement, there's hierarchy of it. A meeting is obviously a bigger deal than an email. So the last meeting was 96 days ago. So it's been a long time. And we've gone through a change of calendar year in that process. So that's now telling a pretty dark story here, that this thing looks pretty stale, and has probably not the realism we expected to have. So then we finish this with deal momentum. Seth, why don't you walk through that?
Yeah, the deal momentum piece is what we kind of alluded to originally, which is basically the number of times you're seeing the opportunity push. And if you look at all your one deals, the majority of them probably don't push at all, meaning that's when you set the stage and we're saying that this deal is going to close in this quarter. Majority of them probably do. And so anytime that they're pushing, that should have your spider senses up as a manager to go, why are we pushing? And is this deal actually real? And so this one pushed out 3 times. I would say we set 2 here as a close date. I would say 1 push is ideal, especially for sales cycles in 50 days. And then the stage 3 to 6 is at 108 days. And we're supposed to be already through 5 and 6 at this point. Yeah, I think we all understand kind of this example that this is probably a dead deal. And the momentum thing as well is, if you can look at a follow-up email, one of the kind of silver nuggets is look at the length of response from the prospect and look at what's being said. As if it's 2 words or it's very vague about I'll get back to you or things like that, that should almost put your spider senses up again, which is, this is maybe something we should sell later on, but this isn't a real deal now. And one of the biggest risks that you have as a leader is following wasted time on deals that aren't real. You forecast it, you get asked questions from leadership. This is a way to kind of avoid that and say, hey, this is something that we feel like is good pipeline for maybe later in the year, but right now, they're just not ready to do anything.
Yeah. So I think what we've concluded through this kind of example is, we as the leader looking at this data set don't believe this deal is real. So that's that kind of litmus test. So now let's move into the second bucket, which is, okay, let's say that I've already kind of put this in the bucket of I don't think it's real. It doesn't necessarily mean it's dead. It could mean that we thought we were farther along. It got deprioritized maybe by the prospect, or other things can happen, end of year, all that kind of stuff. So now we kind of want to get into like, well, where's this deal at? What can we do to look at that? So Seth, why don't you walk through like how you would advise someone to go through. In this example, we're using Gong, doesn't have to be Gong, but this is a Gong example.
Yeah.
How do you go inspect and say, okay, if we know it's not a deal that I'm going to forecast, and it may not even be a real deal, how do I assess where we think it really is based upon looking at some actual interaction?
Yeah, I mean, the first place you're looking at is email, and you're trying to find the last email that was sent and trying to get the context into what it was. Again, the comment I made around the length of response is really critical. So I'm looking at not only what my rep said in that last email, but what the prospect said back, and to start to gauge what reality is. And if I can't get a good context, I might go a couple emails back just to start to see of like, is there a theme here of like vagueness where we're kind of pushing the prospect to get on the phone, but there isn't really any desire on the prospect side. You can tell that they're probably trying to learn a little bit more than actually in an active buying cycle. And then
And or if they responded at all, that too.
yeah,
If it's
and
been a couple
honestly,
of outreaches to no response, that's
in the
obviously
majority in the
indicative.
majority of time, and I don't think there's I don't know what your opinion is. I don't think there's a silver bullet on number of times outreach before you ghosted or lost the deal. Sometimes people just get busy and get caught up and forget about it, or sometimes, to be honest, reps get annoying. You just ignore the email. So the last engagement piece, I would dig right into the email first, and then I'm gonna click into, based on that last email, the last meeting. And that's usually where you're going to find all the gold as a leader. And honestly, the first thing I go to is literally the last 10 minutes of a meeting from the last meeting that we've had with them.
Yeah.
And I want to hear how they ended the meeting. Was it concrete next steps? Was there a plan to this? Did they talk about their process to buying? I'm digging into where they're at now. And majority of the time for reps, we have a lack of ability to understand where they're at in most cases, or just forget. Sometimes you get busy and are in demo, and I'm digging into what is the prospect saying about where they're at, not what we're trying to force them to do. And then also looking at their hesitancy or potentially excitement about doing another step. Step could be doing a POC, could be getting another meeting, could be talking to an executive, getting them on the phone with them. So that's kind of the flow there. And then if you have time, I would even go back, or if you don't feel like you have clarity based on the last meeting, I would go back to the first meeting that we have recorded with them and dig into the pain and context of what that prospect is trying to do, and what they are saying about their own understanding of this buying journey.
Yeah, I think one important piece here is as you've got this kind of deal analysis hat on, you're also doing skill validation of your rep. So what I'm looking at as a leader is not only what's happening to assess, the engagement level, the interest, the fit, so to speak, of this prospect, but also how well did my person execute against this opportunity. And so the last meeting, if that didn't go well, and maybe we didn't feel like there was alignment to kind of where we think the opportunity is, going back to that initial discovery call is the key one, because one thing that's super important, particularly in the current environment, is should we be working on this deal at all? And if your reps, out of maybe fear because pipeline's slow, or just the nature of the current macro environment, often leads people to make emotional decisions, not rational ones. And the emotional decision is reps like to kind of wrap their arms around opportunities, whether they're real or not, because it's like a safety blanket. And your job as a leader is to give them guidance on why that's a bad activity. So if I can go
Yeah.
back to that initial discovery call and find out that this was never a real deal to begin with, then I can coach my rep to say, hey, I listened to that initial discovery call. These shouldn't have been an opportunity, period. Never mind, shouldn't have been one we've spent 3, 4, 5 months now following up with and engaging with.
Yeah, and I think that one of the, going back to our rep days, one of the more annoying things that you would hear from a manager is just go follow up with them. If you're doing all this research, have a point of view on how they should follow up. That's one of the missed skill sets for all sales reps today is, hey, I'm just checking in to see where you're at. Go back to the last meeting, figure out what your point of view on why you're following up and what to help them with as the buyer, so that you can coach the rep and give them specifics on this. So don't waste the time as you're going through this. Try to find something of going, okay, if I'm in their shoes, what would I go and do? So that kind of goes into the piece of like, oh, we're going to win or lose this deal. Like, hey, if you feel like the deal is still real, equip the rep with an understanding of what to go look for and go do next, so that maybe we can avoid getting ghosted the next time.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's an opportunity, for you to coach is, as a leader, you have a bigger and broader business context than your reps may in many cases. Help them understand how businesses think and how stakeholders think. When you go into a new fiscal or calendar year, priorities can and often do change. So it's their responsibility to be empathetic to say, hey, I wanted to follow up. Is this still a priority for your business now that it's 2024? We haven't spoken in a meeting in 3 or 4 months. I want to make sure I'm not bothering you and wasting your time. The fact that they would send something that has a little bit of empathy, a little bit of understanding, often gets a faster response and a more helpful one, where someone says, hey, I apologize, I've been ghosting you. Yeah, this thing's dead. Okay, now I don't need to waste any more time. I can DQ it and move on to the next thing. But just helping your rep to understand the business context of it is a new year. People do new year budgets. They do New Year's priorities. All those things come into play. Whatever you talked about last year may or may not apply, or just may or may not be important anymore.
Yeah, and I think going back to the kind of core concepts to wrap this thing up, when you're going through is the deal real? Those buckets that we put through of like what to pull, you can pull those from Salesforce, you can pull those from HubSpot. We would encourage you to build a report based on that so that you're looking pipeline in that way. Or potentially if you want, if you're using Gong or a tool like it, you can build the reports and the deal boards there. Spend the time to do that and dissect it in that way. You will start to get clarity on reality very fast and have an open mind on reality and try to use these buckets. Again, there's other things to look at. There's other critical pieces that you look at methodology inputs and all the other pieces. This is just a really quick way to assess where you're at and make sure that you feel at least generally confident with the numbers. And if you don't have deal time and stage, close won data, close loss data, pull it from the last quarter or 2 quarters ago and start to get some sort of baseline. And then you'll be able to go through that quickly. And then when you're looking to coach reps and figure out where a deal is at, spend the time to go through execution. It is well worth it. You'll get better clarity and you feel like you have root cause a lot easier. And then you can start to go into things of like, how do I help this rep actually win the deal and not spend time asking him about where's this deal at?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's some good points there. I think in a future video we'll definitely give some guidance on, how to take snippets out of Gong, how to take, specific coaching advice, not follow up with more people, but who or what did you hear about this stakeholder that I might have missed in the meeting, and really just help, situationally coach. I think one of the missed opportunities that we see often is that managers don't use the real life examples to coach. They talk in abstractions. Go back to the call. Hey, at minute 7, listen to what they said. My manager, Bob, needs to be involved. Okay, well, if Bob's not involved, then we didn't check that box or give this person confidence to go to Bob. So let's go back to that. Instead of saying you should have more stakeholders involved, conceptually, sure, but where did I miss that? Help me connect the dots as the rep and where specifically we went through that. So thanks for listening. We're going to continue to do more of these over the coming weeks and months. So hope this is helpful. Any thoughts, questions, other ideas, feel free to add in the comments below, and look forward to showing you on the next one.